The sun was setting over the quiet English countryside when Jimmy Henderson pedaled his bike down the familiar dirt road that led to his home. His 12-year-old face lit up with joy as he pushed harder, racing against the fading light. It was his favorite part of the day, riding home to his father, Jack, who was always waiting on the porch with a warm smile. Jack Henderson watched his son from the porch, his sharp eyes taking in every detail of the boy's movements. A retired Special Air Service SAS soldier, Jack had spent years honing his instincts on battlefields around the world. Now, his days were quieter, spent in the peace of rural life, far from the violence of his past. But no matter how hard he tried to leave it behind, the soldier in him never truly disappeared. As Jimmy approached the house, Jack felt a pang of guilt. He had missed so much of his son's childhood, always chasing wars and missions, leaving Jimmy to grow up with only sporadic visits. But now, after years of being notorious among criminals and soldiers alike for his ruthless efficiency, Jack had chosen to retire, to be a father above all else. The peace of the moment shattered with a strange, high-pitched whine that filled the air. Jack's instincts kicked in instantly. He knew that sound wasn't natural. He grabbed Jimmy, pulling him off his bike and into his arms, eyes scanning the sky. "What's wrong, Dad?" Jimmy asked, his voice tinged with concern. Before Jack could answer, a blinding light shot down from the sky. The noise grew deafening, and the ground trembled beneath them. Jack shielded Jimmy with his body as an explosion erupted in the distance, the shockwave knocking them to the ground. Jack gritted his teeth, his heart racing, as he tried to make sense of what was happening. This wasn't an attack he recognized. It was something far worse. Then they appeared. Out of the smoke and fire, strange, towering figures emerged. Aliens. Their sleek, metallic armor glinted in the fading sunlight, their movements precise and calculated. They were unlike anything Jack had ever seen. Predatory, efficient, and utterly merciless. Panic surged through Jack as he pushed Jimmy behind him, his mind racing with 1,000 strategies. But none of them mattered. He had no weapon, no plan, and no time. The aliens moved with inhuman speed, and before Jack could react, one of them raised its arm, a pulse of energy firing from a device on its wrist. Jack barely saw it happen. One moment, Jimmy was clutching his hand, and the next, the boy collapsed to the ground, his small body limp and lifeless. Jack froze, the world around him narrowing to a point of unbearable clarity. His son, his beautiful, innocent son, was gone. A hollow silence filled the air as if time itself had stopped in recognition of the loss. The alien that had fired the shot looked down at Jimmy's body, then up at Jack, as if assessing whether this human posed any further threat. But Jack was paralyzed, his entire being consumed by grief, so deep it threatened to break him in half. He couldn't breathe. He couldn't think. All he could do was stare at the stillness that was Jimmy. And then, something inside him snapped. A primal scream ripped from Jack's throat as he lunged at the alien, fists swinging wildly. He knew it was futile, that he was throwing himself at something far beyond his ability to kill with bare hands. But he didn't care. This was no longer about logic or survival. This was about his son, his boy, stolen from him in an instant. The alien struck him down effortlessly, sending him sprawling into the dirt. His vision blurred, blood seeping from his mouth, but the pain was nothing compared to the agony in his chest. As the aliens moved on, leaving devastation in their wake, Jack lay there broken. Hours passed before he finally forced himself to rise. His body ached, but it was nothing compared to the cold fury that now consumed him. He stumbled to Jimmy's body, cradling him in his arms, tears streaming down his face. His heart, shattered beyond repair, hardened into something else, something lethal. Jack wasn't just going to mourn. He wasn't going to sit idly while the world tried to make sense of this alien threat. No! These creatures had made a fatal mistake. They had killed his son, and in doing so, they had awoken a force more dangerous than they could ever comprehend. As the last light of day slipped below the horizon, Jack Henderson swore a silent vow. He would hunt them down, He would find them, and he would make them pay. And he wouldn't stop until every last one of them was dead. 2 days after Jimmy's death, Jack Henderson sat in the darkened corner of a nearly empty pub, nursing a pint he barely tasted. His grief had long since turned into a cold, steely resolve. Every thought, every beat of his heart was focused on one goal: revenge. But Jack knew he couldn't do this alone. The aliens were advanced, their technology far beyond anything he had ever faced. He needed a team, not just any team. He needed the best. Taking a deep breath, Jack pulled out his phone. It had been years since he had spoken to any of his old SAS comrades, but the bond they shared went beyond time. He tapped on a contact, one he hadn't used since his military days, and the phone rang. The moment Mason's gravelly voice answered, Jack could almost feel the years falling away. "Mason, it's Jack. I need you." There was a pause on the other end, then a low chuckle. "Hell, Jack. When you call, it's never good news, is it? What's going on?" "Aliens killed my boy." The words felt like shards of glass in his throat. "I'm putting the band back together. I need your rifle." The line went silent for a moment. Then Mason spoke, his voice heavy with an understanding only a fellow soldier could offer. "Where and when?" By nightfall, the core of Jack's old team had gathered in the shadowy backroom of the pub. The flickering lights did little to illuminate the hardened faces of the men sitting around the table, but their reputations needed no introduction. They were the best of the best. If anyone could bring down a band of alien killers, it was them. First to arrive had been Mason, the sniper who could put a bullet between a target's eyes from a mile away. He was lean, with a cold, focused intensity in his eyes that hadn't dulled with time. Jack remembered countless nights where Mason's calm voice in his earpiece had guided them through impossible situations. Tonight, that voice was colder than usual, filled with an undercurrent of rage Jack recognized all too well. Then there was Jonesy, the demolition expert. Jonas's wild grin hadn't changed a bit, though his hair was now peppered with gray. He slapped Jack on the back as if no time had passed, though Jack could see the flicker of concern in his eyes. Jonesy was unpredictable, sometimes unhinged, but when it came to blowing things up, no one did it better. Jack knew that once Jonesy got his hands on some alien tech, he'd make sure they never forgot it. Finally, Vaughn, the tech specialist, slipped in. He had always been the brains behind their operations, calm and calculating where the others relied on muscle and instinct. His sharp mind had saved their skins more times than Jack could count. Vaughn was quiet as always, scanning the room with an analytical gaze before sitting beside Jack. They sat in silence for a few moments, each man processing the gravity of what Jack had told them. They weren't dealing with human enemies anymore. These aliens were something else entirely. Faster, stronger, smarter. But they weren't invincible. And if anyone could prove that, it was this team. Mason was the first to speak. "You sure you want to do this, Jack? You know there's no coming back once we start." Jack's jaw clenched. He didn't hesitate. "They killed my son, Mason. I'm not stopping until they pay for it." Jonesy leaned forward, his grin gone, replaced by a steely seriousness. "Then let's make sure we do it right. I've got some contacts who can get us the gear we need. Alien tech might be advanced, but nothing blows up better than a good old-fashioned bomb." Vaughn nodded. "I've been monitoring reports. The military's barely scratched the surface on these things, but I've pulled some data on their movements. I think I can pinpoint where they're hiding out." Jack leaned back, feeling a strange mix of gratitude and determination. His old team was with him, no questions asked. They were as committed to this fight as he was. But this time, it wasn't about duty or orders. It was personal for all of them. "There's one group responsible for Jimmy's death," Jack said, his voice cold and resolute. "We're going after them first." The next few hours were spent devising a plan, poring over Vaughn's data and plotting their first strike. Each man fell back into his role with practiced ease, their military instincts kicking in like a well-oiled machine. Jack watched them work, feeling the weight of the task ahead, but also a renewed sense of purpose. This wasn't just about revenge anymore. It was about sending a message. When they finally stood to leave, Jack felt a shift in the air. The world outside the pub was dark and silent, but within the group, a storm was brewing. The aliens had no idea what was coming for them, and Jack wouldn't stop until he had justice for his son, no matter how many of them he had to kill to get it. The night was thick with tension as Jack and his team moved silently through the desolate forest. Moonlight filtered through the branches, casting long shadows that seemed to shift with every step they took. The air was cold, but Jack's blood boiled with the heat of revenge. This was the moment he had been waiting for. The hunt had begun. Mason, crouched low, raised his hand, signaling a halt. Through the scope of his rifle, he scanned the terrain ahead. Contact. 2 sentries, 70 meters out. Looks like they're guarding the perimeter, he whispered. Jack nodded. The aliens were here, just as Vaughn had predicted. The outpost they had located was a small one, but it was where the group responsible for Jimmy's death was hiding. Jack could feel it in his bones. He signaled Jonesy to move forward. The demolition expert grinned in the darkness, slipping 2 grenades from his belt. Silent but deadly, that was their way. The team fanned out, each man taking his position. Jack's heart pounded as he looked through his own binoculars, eyes narrowing at the sight of the alien sentries. They were tall, skeletal figures, their movements unerringly smooth, their armor shimmering faintly in the moonlight. Every second Jack watched them only fueled his rage. These were the creatures who had murdered his son, and tonight he would have his retribution. Vaughn's voice crackled softly in his earpiece. They're using a frequency jammer, but I bypassed it. There's a cave system under the hill. Leads straight to their command center. We hit them fast and hard. Minimal resistance. Jack gave the signal, and in an instant, the force exploded into action. Mason's rifle spat death, his shots precise, dropping the sentries before they could raise an alarm. Jack sprinted forward, his team close behind, as they descended into the alien stronghold. The entrance was a gaping maw in the earth, hidden from aerial surveillance, but not from Vaughn's hacking prowess. Inside, the air was thick with the stench of alien machinery and something far more sinister, something organic. The walls of the cave pulsed faintly, lined with strange biomechanical structures that defied human comprehension. Jack's skin crawled as they moved deeper, each step taking them closer to the heart of the enemy. "Stay sharp," Jack muttered, his voice low and cold. The team advanced, weapons at the ready. Suddenly, a low growl echoed through the cavern and the ground trembled. From the shadows, a group of alien soldiers emerged, larger than the sentries outside, with heavy, plated armor and glowing red eyes that cut through the dark. The ambush came fast, but Jack and his team were faster. Mason dropped to one knee, picking off aliens with methodical precision. Jonesy lobbed his grenades into the fray, the explosions lighting up the cave like fireworks. The sound of gunfire, shouts, and alien screeches filled the space, but Jack moved through it all with deadly focus. His knife flashed as he engaged an alien at close range, slicing through its armored neck in a brutal, efficient motion. The aliens fought back with savage intensity, their energy weapons humming with deadly power. Jack narrowly dodged a pulse blast, feeling the heat graze his skin. Vaughn was at his side, his tech-savvy hands working furiously to hack into the alien systems as they fought. "Almost there," Vaughn grunted, fingers flying over his device. "Just need a few more seconds." Seconds felt like hours in the chaos of battle. Jack's muscles burned with the effort, but his mind was locked on one thing. The aliens responsible for Jimmy's death were here, and nothing would stop him from finding them. Finally, with a sharp beep, Vaughn's device flashed green. "Got it. Their command center's just ahead." Jack didn't wait for further instruction. He led the charge deeper into the complex, heart hammering in his chest. This was it. As they reached the core of the outpost, the sight that greeted them was nothing short of grotesque. In the center of the chamber stood a tall, silver-skinned alien, clearly the leader of this particular cell, surrounded by strange cocoon-like pods. Inside the pods were human children, their faces pale and lifeless, hooked to tubes that siphoned their energy. Jack's stomach twisted. He saw Jimmy's face in each of those children, the horror of their fate driving him forward with reckless abandon. "You bastards!" Jack roared as he lunged toward the alien leader. The alien turned, its cold, black eyes narrowing as it registered the fury in Jack's approach. But before it could raise its weapon, Mason's rifle cracked, and the alien dropped to the floor, its body twitching in its death throes. Jack stood over it, breathing heavily, his knife gripped tightly in his hand. He stabbed it once, then twice, releasing all the anger and grief that had consumed him since the day Jimmy died. But there was no satisfaction in the kill, only emptiness. As the last alien fell, Vaughn moved to the pods, working quickly to shut down the grotesque machines. "They're dead," he said quietly, confirming what Jack already knew. Experimentation. They were using the children for something. Jack's chest heaved with silent fury. They had come so far, fought so hard, but it wasn't over yet. Not by a long shot. "They're just one cell," Jack muttered, wiping the blood from his blade. "There's more of them out there. We're going to find them all." The night sky burned crimson as Jack and his team stood on the ridge, overlooking the alien fortress. This was it, the heart of their operations. Vaughn had traced a signal from the cave's command center, leading them to this sprawling compound hidden deep within the Scottish Highlands. It pulsed with alien energy, a vast hive of biomechanical structures teeming with the creatures who had stolen Jimmy from him. Jack's breath misted in the frigid air as he stared down at the stronghold, his grip tightening on his rifle. This would be the end. Every step of their hunt had led them here, to the final bastion of the alien forces responsible for so much pain. His son's face flashed in his mind, fueling the fire that had driven him this far. Tonight, he would finish what they started. Mason knelt beside him, adjusting the scope of his sniper rifle. "They're not expecting us. This is going to be ugly," he said quietly. "That's the point," Jack replied, his voice cold and flat. "No mercy." Jonesy chuckled darkly from behind them. "Good. I've got a whole bag of surprises for these bastards." The plan was simple. Hit the aliens where it hurt, fast and hard. Vaughn had disabled their defenses remotely, leaving the compound vulnerable. This was a fight they couldn't afford to lose. The aliens might be more advanced, but Jack and his team had something far deadlier: ruthless determination. "Everyone ready?" Jack asked, his eyes scanning each of his comrades. They nodded in grim unison. They were battle-hardened soldiers, but this was different. This wasn't just war. This was retribution. With a final nod, they moved. The descent was swift and silent, their footsteps lost in the howling wind. Jack's heart raced as they neared the perimeter, the pulsating hum of alien machinery growing louder with each step. Mason went ahead, his sniper rifle taking out the sentries before they even knew they were under attack. One by one, the towering creatures fell, their bodies collapsing into the snow without a sound. When they reached the outer gates, Jonas's grin widened. "My turn," he whispered, planting charges along the gate's massive hinges. He stepped back, and with a sharp crack, the gates exploded inward, throwing debris and smoke into the compound. The team surged forward, weapons raised, cutting through the chaos. Aliens poured out of the structure, their energy weapons blazing. But Jack was faster. He ducked and rolled, his rifle barking death as he shot down anything that moved. Mason's shots echoed in the background, each one finding its mark with deadly precision. Vaughn stayed close to Jack, feeding him real-time data through their earpieces. "Main power source is in the central chamber. Take that out, and their whole system crashes," Vaughn said, his voice calm despite the chaos erupting around them. Jack's mind was focused, every action a means to an end. The aliens might have superior technology, but they had underestimated the resolve of a father seeking vengeance. His team tore through the compound with brutal efficiency, the aliens falling like wheat before the scythe. Each kill brought Jack a small measure of grim satisfaction, but it wasn't enough. Not yet. As they fought their way deeper into the fortress, the walls began to pulse with a strange energy, almost as if the structure was alive. Jack could feel it. The alien leader was close. The one who had ordered the death of his son, the one behind all of this. They reached the central chamber, a cavernous room dominated by a massive, pulsating core. Energy crackled through the air, casting eerie shadows across the walls. And there, standing at the base of the core, was the alien commander, taller than the others. Its silver armor gleamed with an unnatural light, and its black, soulless eyes locked onto Jack with a malevolent intelligence. Jack's blood boiled. This was the creature he had been hunting, the one responsible for Jimmy's death. Without a word, he charged forward, his team providing covering fire as he closed the distance between them. The alien commander raised its arm, a pulse weapon charging with a high-pitched whine, but Jack was faster. He tackled the alien, slamming it into the ground with all his strength. They grappled in the dirt, Jack's fists pounding against the alien's armor, but it fought back with inhuman strength, throwing him off balance. Jack rolled to his feet, drawing his knife in one swift motion. He could hear the sounds of battle raging around him, but in this moment, nothing else mattered. It was just him and the alien, the final piece of this bloody puzzle. With a roar, Jack drove his knife into the alien's chest, the blade piercing through its armor with a sickening crunch. The creature let out a shriek, its black eyes widening in shock. Jack twisted the blade, watching as the light slowly faded from its gaze. For a moment, the world seemed to stand still. Jack stood over the fallen commander, his chest heaving, his hands slick with alien blood. This was it, the vengeance he had sought for so long. But as he stared down at the lifeless body, the emptiness inside him remained. Vaughn's voice crackled in his ear. "Jack, the core. We need to blow it before reinforcements arrive." Jack blinked, snapping back to reality. "Do it," he said, his voice hoarse. Jonesy rushed forward, planting charges around the core, his movements quick and precise. 30 seconds, he yelled. The team sprinted for the exit, their boots pounding against the metal floor as the compound shook behind them. As they reached the ridge, the fortress erupted in a blinding explosion, the fireball lighting up the night sky. Jack stared at the inferno, his heart heavy. The aliens were dead, but no victory would ever bring Jimmy back.